Okay, so I'm going to make a quick video for you with the rest of the notes on immigration here. Test over immigration industrialization is going to be on Wednesday. If you're not going to be here, we'll figure out some way for you to do it someday, time, or something. Um, but if you have any questions about that, or just shoot me an email to let me know what your schedule's like and how we can work this out. And if not, we'll get it hopefully when we're back at school. So anyway, remember we've been talking about immigration and what it was like for these people to come into America, and what the experience was of immigrating to America, um, for kind of the first time, and how a lot of people were, not a lot of people, but 2% of the people get turned back. Families can be broken up, trying to find a place to go to be able to kind of settle in and be comfortable in the country, getting jobs at the factories. I mean, these are the conditions that all immigrants faced. They don't speak very good English. They provide um, low cost labor, and when they get here, they're quickly taken advantage of by business people that are looking to find workers that they're not gonna have to pay much to. So we talked about a lot of this stuff. We're going to continue and kind of finish that up today. So let's go ahead and kind of get right into it. All right. So one of the big things that happens as a result of the immigration boom is a massive urbanization throughout the United States. Um, Now, immigration leads to the rise of many big cities around the turn of the century, like New York and Chicago and others. Hopefully, you recognize that from the population assignment that we did over the weekend and on Friday, how we see just this massive growth in the population of the United States, particularly in some cities that were once really kind of small communities, and then because of immigration, grow massively to become these huge American cities. New York was always big. New York was always going to be big, but New York got huge because of immigration. Chicago, not as much. Chicago is an example of a city that, gets a huge influx of immigrants and becomes kind of this center in the country for commerce, because it's a big railroad hub. And you also have Lake Michigan there and access to rivers and things like that, which makes it a big city. And then you get other places that grow, like Cleveland and um, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Detroit, St. Louis. So we see urbanization and happen where people are living less rural lives and are living more in the cities. Okay, the growth of cities is what we call urbanization. Life had always been one where people kind of live on their farm and do their thing and aren't necessarily in contact with a whole lot of people in their normal daily lives. Well, with urbanization, that all changes as our population continues to increase. Um, Population in cities gets larger and larger, and you get more and more. You get more and more people, and more and more people means more jobs, and more jobs means more factories, which means we need even more people. So we see these cities go from like regular cities to big urban metropolises, and that's kind of what urbanization is. Okay, so what are working conditions like for a lot of people living and working in these big urban centers? Okay, so with the industrial boom, obviously there's a lot of jobs available for immigrants. That's what attracts them over. Remember, immigrants are generally coming from countries that are not quite yet industrialized. Um, if you've got a factory job in England, you're not going to come to the United States to get another factory job, right? So, with this boom in industry, the reason that so many people are coming over here is because jobs are plentiful, opportunities for a better life are plentiful, and immigrants can literally come right off the boat, and as long as they pass through the inspection thing and get cleared to come on into the United States completely, there's people waiting there, waiting to offer them jobs. Now, these jobs didn't pay very well, but probably a little bit better than what they would have than the situations that they were living in Europe. And if they're willing to work hard, they're going to be able to improve their life, right? So a lot of these people get jobs for very little money in factories, working on assembly lines, um, or working in meatpacking plants, which are some of the worst conditions to work in. But those are the opportunities that are available. There's a lot of literature out there that talks about, from around the turn of the century, about how bad life was for a lot of immigrants trying to work and get by in these really, really tough conditions. Um, Very poor working conditions. Um, Diseases were rampant. Okay, part of the reason diseases were so common, in particular tuberculosis, which was like one of the number one diseases that affected immigrants, uh, um, were basically because these you get all these people moving into these cities, working in these close quarters, and people get sick. You didn't have things in place to keep people healthy and sanitization, especially like meat packing plants. There's horrible stories about what the meat packing plants were like and the conditions were like in these plants. And like The Jungle by Upton Sinclair would be one example of a book that talks about how bad the working conditions were for these people. But again, you did it because there was no other option available, uh, and you did it because you wanted a chance to get ahead in America. So it wasn't uncommon actually to see there be accidents at plants and factories because of unsafe working conditions or dangerous machinery. Machines don't work the way they work today. Machines back then were volatile and combustible and dangerous, and something could happen and they could fail or explode. Remember, part of the reason the Homestead strike happened in Pennsylvania was because a worker died from unsafe machinery and there was nothing to take care of his family. So these were really difficult circumstances and difficult conditions with which people had to fight through and kind of find a way to survive and work and thrive uh, in these really, really hard scrabble conditions. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about kind of the social diversity that exists. Um, what America becomes known as during this immigration period is a melting pot. What a melting pot is basically a mixture of people from different cultures and races that are blended together. And it makes America really kind of, especially in the cities, not as much in the rural areas because you don't get as many people there, but it makes America kind of, this unique place where there's not one type of superior culture or anything like that so much. You have lots of people practicing a lot of their cultural traditions. When you go to these big cities, you have like a Chinatown and a Little Italy and things like that. And you have those things because when all the immigrants would come in, they would kind of flock to these similar neighborhoods, and they would create kind of a culture in these neighborhoods where we have, cuisines and ethnic foods and things that speak to a particular country or group's cultural background. And that's something that makes America, in many ways, a really unique place, especially for people feeling comfortable coming to the United States from their home country, where they feel comfortable enough that they can practice whatever religion they want, and that they can kind of keep some of their cultural attitudes alive. Um, Now, one of the problems with this is something called, I think it's on here, nativism. Okay, so a lot of immigrants who refuse to give up kind of these cultural backgrounds um, do face a lot of resentment from native-born Americans, especially after the World Wars. Okay, and this leads to something called nativism. Okay, nativism is favoritism towards native-born Americans, um, and basically what that means is something that we refer to as a WASP, which stands for White Anglo-Saxon Protestant. Um, this is common amongst hate groups like the KKK, where they kind of don't like anybody other than white Protestants, right? And that includes Catholics. That includes because this is where the Catholic population during this turn of the 20th century really blossomed. The Catholic population in the United States really grew substantially because you got many from Ireland and excuse me, Ireland and Italy. So they see a lot of resentment and distaste, particularly after the World Wars, where there's a lot of anti-German sentiment, which sometimes means that people lose jobs or opportunities because of their ethnic background, which again, like I said before, how people kind of go towards these communities where their culture kind of exists. It all happens because of nativism. They need to kind of come together. All the Italian people need to come together. Otherwise, they're going to face harassment potentially and other problems because of kind of these attitudes that exist a little bit in the country. Okay, so ultimately, these nativists kind of ultimately demand immigration restrictions, and that does happen a little bit. It kind of varies from leadership to leadership. We see, certainly different presidents, even today, kind of take different approaches to immigration and how that should be dealt with. Because certainly the Trump administration has been taking a very different approach to immigration than the Obama administration or even the Bush administration did. So, it changes from time to time and leadership to leadership. But the concept of nativism, which is still very much alive today, it comes and goes at different times in American history, but always kind of returns in some form or another, usually focused on a different group. Today, our nativist tendencies tend to focus on like Latin American immigrants and Mexicans and maybe a little bit on Middle Easterners. But during this time, in the turn of the 20th century, it was, of course, mostly Southern and Central European immigrants who the people that were here and established already kind of looked down upon as kind of a lesser breed of people, so to speak. Okay, so let's look at some of the general statistics of immigration overall. And you got some of this with that population handout, but let's just take a look again. So China, Germany, and this isn't in any particular order, but China, Germany, Ireland, Poland, Russia, and Italy had the greatest number of immigrants in this period, roughly 1880 to 1920. In urban growth was substantial, right? We noticed that already with that assignment. From 1860 to 1900, the number of cities with 100,000 to 500,000 residents exploded from 7 to 32. So we've got 32 what you would qualify as big cities in America by 1900. So the country is growing. Its economic base is growing. Its social base is growing. Its political base is growing. We're becoming a much more substantial country. We see cities with 500,000 or more people from 1860 to 1900, triple from 2 to 6. You're talking like New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, Boston, Cleveland, I think, was in there, and Cleveland, and I can't think of the other one. So we're seeing really the population grow all over the country really, really quickly. You get your first million, your first million citizen population in New York, and other cities soon follow after that. So what are some conclusions we can make about industrialization and immigration? Okay, so typically immigrants come to the United States looking for new opportunity, looking for a better life, looking to improve their position from whatever it was, wherever they were. The effect that this has on America is it leads to this big boom in the U.S. economy, where there's lots of jobs available for workers, and jobs available for workers with limited to no skill in a particular field, because they weren't jobs that required a great amount of skill. They were jobs that required bodies that could just do the work. And this leads, though, it is the labor force. It is really the labor force, and primarily of immigrants, that fuel the Industrial Revolution. This is what makes America a powerful country, right? It was this immigration that really helps us become a world superpower. It makes America a very different place. It moves us from being a rural society to an urban society. If you look today, um, we just had the election, and you look at states, right, and city areas tend to be much more democratic in terms of how they vote, and how much longer it took to count up all the votes in cities like Atlanta and Philadelphia and Detroit, Michigan, right, and like Phoenix, Arizona, because there's so much more population there. Like if you look at a map, if you look at the electoral map that shows who wins each state, and it always looks that there's more red states than there are blue states, because the red states, like they're those big plain states that tend to be just larger in size. But even more so, um, if you look at like if they broke it down by county, it would be even more red. The thing would be even more red in color because, again, there's such an overwhelming population in these big city areas of Democratic voters. And, the reason I'm telling you this is just to show you how we go from that rural to urban population, the big difference that makes really in the makeup and the way America works and is. Okay, so by 1900, the United States was well on its way toward becoming the dominant figure in world and political arena. We're not there yet in 1900. In 1900, if you ranked the world powers, right? Now, the United States by 1900 is certainly number one in terms of industrial, like production, but then you got to add economics and politics and social aspects in there as well. If you had to rank the top 5 countries in like 1900, it'd probably be like number 1, Germany, number 2, Great Britain, number 3, France, number 4, maybe the United States or Russia or Japan. But we're not there yet. We won't be that number 1 top country really until after World War II. So anyway, that's the rest of the notes for chapter. That's the rest of the notes for not chapter, but for industrialization and immigration. I will send you the study guide for the test that you can use to prepare, and we'll figure out a time for you to make up the test. So, all right. Hope to see you back at school soon.